Oh, amazing. Absolutely amazing. For those that are traveling in here, it's going to blow your mind. I've been to a lot of World Cups, a lot of different countries, but this is different. To see everything in one centralized place where you can see different stadiums in the distance. Yeah, this is going to be great. Yeah, it is. It's really sad news, Neil. So he was due to captain the team against Bahrain. He'd had a good training week. And in the warm-up, he just felt a little bit of tightness in his calf and tried to push it a little bit further. And it sort of led to maybe a tear in there. So we're just working through the MRIs and getting all the final details. But he just wasn't able to create any explosivity out of the calf. And rightly so, he pulled himself out of the game. And then our medical team assessed him, and it wasn't great news. To be fair, the timing of his return was going to take anything up to 14 days, and with Doneil, he put the team first. It's one of them decisions that we could have tried to return him to play and had him later on in the tournament, but he knew it was the right decision to make, to allow another player that had earned that right and that was fully fit to come and take that opportunity. So, it was a big moment. I mean, it really shows the courage and what this brotherhood's about, when a man can sort of surrender his shirt and take that step forward to support the team in a different role. So he's with us now, Neil. We'll return him in his rehab. We have, some mental performance people to help him deal with what is a really painful moment for him. And he'll work alongside me and the cultural team to help, build the brotherhood and be a good sounding board through this World Cup. No, not really. I think I definitely think Liam Fraser had a strong performance. We needed to see, what level he was operating at. That was really important. We he took a week's leave from his club to be part of that. And, I thought his second half performance was one of the shining lights in the performance. But, a lot of that work with that group, and, we'd help make that clear that for many of those players, it was about making sure that we understood that they were ready if, players went down in this last sort of weekend and over the training days. So it was about really assessing those MLS players to know whether they could really back up if needed and if called upon, but also to make sure that, those core players, the ones that had contributed to getting us to the World Cup, that they'd done the work. We can see numbers, we know the gym sessions that they've done, but to see them in match fitness against Bahrain was really important, and to see if they were, mentally committed and physically committed. And, while the conditions were tough, it was a tough game. There wasn't there that raised the major red flag that would say that any of those players didn't deserve to be selected or any of the other players were ahead of them. Yeah, Atiba played in the cup match. He played 70 minutes and he did well. I mean, for a guy who hasn't played since June in a pre-season friendly, I thought his performance through 45 minutes was where it needed to be at this stage. It was against a second division team, so sometimes it's difficult to see, the challenge, because it's going to look a bit different when you've got, De Bruyne, Witsel and Tielemans playing in there against Belgium. But in all seriousness, he came through. That was the main thing. He came through. He didn't provoke that injury in any way, shape or form. And he accumulated minutes in the bank, and that's important at this stage. We've got minutes in the bank ready for him against Japan. That's his next mission. And obviously today, there's a reality of where he's at. For him to have pushed through with Besiktas was probably not the best thing anyway. For us as a medical team, a physical team, we weren't overly excited about Atiba playing extra minutes in this game. Like, he needed that time to recover, and he might have been at risk if he'd started in the match today. So I think it was we're in a good space with where he's at coming in, and hopefully he can accumulate minutes against Japan. I think the first thing was just to assess where he was at after taking nearly 2 weeks off from his last game, and I think that was an important part, just to make sure that he was still at that sharpness and match fitness. I don't think people realize when you have those stale periods, it does take time to get back into rhythm. So he was in rhythm. That was the first thing we seen him coming into the camp, and I felt like he picked up from where he left off in September. I thought he had quite a dominant camp, showed his quality, and I said it after the game. He's a sort of player that, given where we want to get to as a team, he has a think forward, turn forward, play forward mentality, and that takes a lot of courage and bravery, and sometimes only comes with youth. So he's definitely holding that, if you're good enough, you're old enough, target at this point in my mind. And his goal was, for me, a bit of an icing on the cake in that camp, just to show that he's got the confidence to play, behind lines, closer to the back line, and show that he can contribute in the goals area. So a lot of positives, but at the same time, that was Bahrain. I mean, that's a team that, Canada in different conditions I would expect to really dominate. We had some good dominant periods, but there was also periods where Ismael went a bit quiet. And I think that's, part of his growth and development. It's a journey. He mentioned it today on his selection. He's on a bit of a wild journey, and there's a lot of new experiences for him. It's a very stimulating environment. It's a lot to take in for people. And whether you're playing an MLS semi-final or you play your first cap for Canada, a World Cup's different, and the opponents are different. They'll smell and they'll take advantage of any inexperience. That's the level we're dealing with when you're coming up against, De Bruyne, Hazard, Lukaku, Tielemans. These players can smell and sense the inexperience in players, and we'll take advantage. So we've got to manage that with the excitement of also knowing we've got a very talented prospect there with a lot of confidence. Yeah, I think it's a huge advantage. These players have fought together in the club environment. They've grown in confidence. There's obviously some chemistry there. They understand each other's strengths and weaknesses. So for me, yeah, it's a huge plus. And you can have those boys that, tend to hang out together as well. So, I think coming into this environment, they tend to feel comfortable enough to be part of a wider group, and I think some of them were part of this wider group before they signed for CF Montreal. They sort of evolved together on the men's national team, people like Kamal and Alistair, before signing in that environment. So I don't think there's any issues with that group in terms of being too tight together. I only see strengths and positives in, I think, how these groups are. The Montreal players are going to react in this environment, but also bring the confidence and experience that they've had in this last year. It's exciting. A huge message to young Canadians in this country that, the pathway to the World Cup is non-linear. It's a dynamic approach. You have to keep believing. And what I believe the Canadian Premier League has done is created a foundation for players in this country to keep believing, to keep pushing. And, I think we all hope that our Premier League becomes, a top league in years to come, in decades to come. And that's been started by a group of pioneers now that in 5, 10, 20 years time we'll be celebrating a lot more. Yeah, I always prioritize those that don't make the squad. I think that's the most important conversation. The other players, we've been talking for months, about their roles, their responsibilities. It's, more that group that are sort of fighting from that 20 to 26 places. There's been 40 guys that have contributed to this 20-game journey to qualify. You know, people like Jaden Nelson, you know, they've been in camps, you know, back in the COVID times. You know, Jacob Schaffelberg, they've had moments where they've contributed on the pitch in this qualification. Charles Andre Abraham, Theo Corbenau have all played their part. And those conversations were the most important to me. You know, they got the standard notification by mail, and then just a follow-up connect with myself to thank them and again wish them all the best. But you know, I knew they were on the flight, and once they land here, you know, they don't need any special words from me and congratulations. I think many of them knew they'd done the work, James, to get here, and the ones that didn't get the call, I think they knew they were in. Yeah, you've picked that for sure. He's in that centre-back depth. I mean, his core role with Canada is centre midfielder, but he's bracketed in that centre-back position. For me, you know, having worked with him now in that role against Mexico in the Gold Cup and other games he's played at centre-back, he still has a class IQ wherever you play him on the pitch. And for me, he's definitely got that profile to be able to give us something in that position. And his experience puts him potentially ahead of some of the other centre-backs. So he certainly is major depth in that position. But, I mean, ultimately, it's not his primary role. And I think playing in his first World Cup, probably his last World Cup, I'd like to think that there might not be another one round the corner for him. But yeah, I'm sure he wants to represent in his niche and where he feels he can get the best out of himself. So it'll be more of an emergency situation as well as some tactical adaptability if we see Atiba in that role.